Welcome to Integrated Insights with ICCG. For more than 30 years, our team has partnered with small business owners to prepare for and navigate the business transaction process. Pull up a chair as we share stories and insights from our experience on all sides of the M&A table. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name is Michael. I'm going to be your host today. I'm joined by Andrew and Mason. Thanks for joining us, guys. Today, we're going to be talking about process and do a little bit of Q&A. So guys, let's start out with how long does it generally take to complete a transaction?
Yeah, I mean, every deal is different, but generally takes 6 to 9 months. There's a lot that goes into the deal, and that's why it's important to have an advisor that can keep the deal moving along.
Yeah, I think the key thing that Mason said there was the advisor, right? And it's not just us, right? There are many people that are involved within a deal, right? It's not just buyer and seller and advisor. There could be a banker, could be attorney, could be so many different individuals. And at the end of the day, it as long as everybody is on the same page, it could be done fairly quickly. And so it does depend on people. It depends on, it depends on so much. So, Mason, what's the longest that we've worked with a client? I can't remember.
Well,
years.
There's
right?
one that's been around about as long as I've been around, and it hasn't closed yet. So,
with ICCG or alive?
No,
not alive. No,
I've been here like 2.5 years. It's been about 2 years.
I mean, look, it's not just one deal. It's really trying to work with the client too, right? I think it's preparing and then doing the deal. And so, but what we tell our clients is, by the time you engage us to actually go present them on the market, it will take a minimum of 6 months.
Yeah. I would also add that when we say advisor, that is us, but also lawyers are important, having a good attorney, because they can hold deals up. They're notorious for it. So I think it's good. It's good to have an advisor. It's even better to have a better attorney. So
there you go. Good stuff. So Andrew, you mentioned that there's quite a few people involved in the process, and that can slow it down, right? Just having a lot of different people there. In addition to that, though, there are steps to this process, right? It is a process that we're going through. It's not just a one-time transaction event. What does that process look like? What are the different steps of a transaction process?
I'll answer it in two different ways. There's the process before and the process during. And so, the process before is planning and prepping, right? You have to talk through expectations. I mean, it takes some time for us to work through our clients' expectations. It takes, hey, we've got to see not only financials, we need to look through the company as a whole, or, the org chart, the organization chart, understanding the culture of the company. We have to understand the company before we can figure out who is the right buyer. If we're going to vet buyers for the company, then we have to understand the company, and because not all the buyers that we like to work with are good fits for the company, right? And so we have to understand the company as much as we can. We may not be auditing them, but we do dive in deep to really understand the company.
And what is that process? So once we go to market the company, we engage with a client. What happens after engagement all the way through till closing?
Yeah. So once you're engaged, and we've done a deep dive into the company, the financials, that's when we're going to start building out how we're going to present the company to future buyers. So we're going to create your SIM, or your confidential information memorandum. It's a broad overview of the business, the history of the business, the financials, the revenue model, and we'll also build out a teaser, which is just a one pager, doesn't give anything like
General
confidential,
information.
key information, doesn't give that. That way we can send it out. And if somebody's interested, based off of what they've seen in the teaser, we'll get them to sign an NDA. And then that's when they're going to get the SIM. So that's the next step is we build out the marketing material. That way we can send it out to buyers and start that process.
Okay. So, and then once they've gotten the SIM, that's when we get the offers coming in, get to select which offer is the best for the buyer or for the seller.
Yeah, I wish it was like that. I do. I mean, if I will say I have been given the compliment before. Wow, really? I don't have any questions. You guys did such a great job in conveying all the information that we needed. That was one time that happened. And look, I mean, every buyer is different. They're going to look at different things, and every company is different. And so they're going to the different things are going to be needed to be highlighted in the information.
Yeah.
And so we after the SIM and the financial spreadsheet, we'll say that we send them, that they review, they come with a list of questions, a host of questions, if you will, and it's either through email or over the phone. They will ask a ton of questions, and that's the time where I know Mason and I love to say it's our Q&A call, a Q&A time, and the questions come from us and the answers come from them. And the reason is because that's our time for vetting. There is some initial vetting that we'll do. Hey, okay, we like to keep in touch with the buyers to understand, hey, do you retrade? No. Okay, great, perfect. All those kind of things. But we still have to ask them certain questions that are specific to the deal, maybe. And that we need to do our due diligence on them before we really answer their questions. And so we'll spend that time doing that, and then they'll ask their questions that we've got to answer.
So we ask a lot of questions, do some due diligence up front, just through that Q&A like you're talking about. But then we enter into actual due diligence, right? What does that process look like, and how can a seller prepare for due diligence?
It's a long process, can be. Typically, the buyer's going to send over a list of 200 line items of just important information that they want to see. It's not, the buyer is not wanting to try to find out something negative. That's not what their intent. They want to understand the business so they can run it well. So they're going to do a deep dive, and the best way to prepare is to have everything in order financially, your corporate documents that you've had over the years, articles of incorporation, that kind of stuff, just your formation docs. They're always going to want to see that. If you've had any lawsuits, then they're going to want to see those docs. So just having clean financials, having everything in order, knowing where everything is going to prepare you so well for the due diligence process.
Yeah, I'll say the best way to prepare for it, at least for us, right? When it's our client, I'll tell a client, hey, the best way you can prepare for it is get to know Mason. And at the end of the day, Mason is going to take that list of 200 items. Mason, what's the largest list that you've ever gotten?
Yeah, it's 200 something.
200 something. Yeah, I mean it comes in all shapes and sizes, but really you want to utilize Mason. Mason will set up everything that is needed and will help get organized so you can send everything to Mason. You can upload it to Dropbox maybe, or whatever, however the process is, but send it to Mason so that he can organize it in the way that he can. And that's why we call Mason our due diligence extraordinaire. So
this may be a point for a different time, but having somebody on the inside that's going to be your go-to, I guess, throughout the due diligence process, whether it's your CFO or somebody on your team. Just getting them ready, making them aware of it. I think that'll help as well.
That's
Absolutely.
great. And Mason, you mentioned having clean financials. Andrew, can you talk a little bit about that? What does he mean by having clean financials?
Clean financials. Well, that's a great question because we get we get a set of financials. When we ask for a set of financials, we never know we never know what to expect, and that's one of the hardest things for us because it can be disorganized. It could be most blue collar business owners. They'll maybe say, okay, here's a PDF of that. Well, no, okay, let's make sure we have to have it in certain ways. If they're using QuickBooks, that's great. We've actually asked, hey, do you want us to help download the report from QuickBooks we'll go to their office and help them download it with them, and really, that's where it's we're not CPA firms. We're not here to clean up your books, but you can also ask your CPA to help you, and we are there to really display what is accurate in the as in what is accurate in QuickBooks and in the company. That is key for the buyer because they have to know what they're buying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, so basically, in some way, in some instances, having clean books can be necessary, right? The cleanliness can mean that there's stuff going on that shouldn't be going on there, right? But in other ways, it can just mean really simplifying the process, right, for our sellers. Because if their books are clean and we can understand them, and we get that version that we can see where a number came from, we're not going to have as many questions, right? It should speed up that process a little bit. That's awesome. Good stuff. So we do the due diligence. In some ways, that's where our process can start a little bit, right? That's at least where our negotiation, at least post that initial agreement up front, those expectations that we talked about, and that's where that can start. So what happens after due diligence as far as coming to final terms and moving toward closing?
Yeah, after due diligence, that's when the fun begins with the asset purchase agreement or the purchase agreement, whether if it's stock or asset. And so it goes into the attorney's hands, and typically we get to look at whatever the attorney sends over or we send out, whether we're on the buy or sell side. And that's when we just, hound the attorneys to keep the deal moving along. That's the next step.
Yeah, I'll even back up further is that there are some business terms in there. If we're on the sell side, the buyer's attorney is responsible for drafting the APA. And once if we're on the sell side, once we get it, we have to review the business terms of the agreement. Yes, to make sure that it reflects the LOI, but also that there may be some other things that are that are not in the LOI that come up in the APA or the purchase agreement, and we have to notify, or we have to highlight that and make sure that our seller is okay with that. We'll work with our client's attorney to figure all that out. And, I think that's really what an advisor should do. Not all advisors do it, but an advisor should be able to look through that prior to the attorney taking their turn at it.
And the reason we do that is to save our client money on attorney fees, is that we've already kind of gotten ahead of the game in doing that.
Mm-hmm. And then even backing up even further, because in between the APA or the due diligence and the purchase agreement, there might be some, okay, hey, we have to clarify, we found this in due diligence. A buyer may say, okay, hey, that was a little different, or because of this, we have to retrade. Look, I'm not saying that we have said before, we don't like retrading, and we don't like working with buyers that retrade, but it can happen, right? It has happened for our clients, and there are the right reasons to retrade, but a buyer may just try to retrade, and so we have to negotiate that part, and then they can go ahead and write up their purchase agreement. And so there's this negotiation there that happens again, and once you get past that, hopefully the odds are higher that you can close the deal.
Earlier, you mentioned NDAs. We do those a couple times throughout the process, both when we're bringing it to market and when we have a potential buyer. At least when we're working on the sell side. So how does that NDA? How do the processes that we put in place protect the confidentiality of our clients?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, NDA, non-disclosure agreement, is well, it's as good as the two people that signed it, right? And so, but even with an NDA, there are still things that we won't give out, right? And at the end of the day, we have to be good stewards of the information that we have. And so the timing and the extent of what you give and how you give it is incredibly important, because the buyer has reasons for wanting to see certain things, and you have to sometimes delay giving the full details while satisfying the immediate need of the buyer, right? And so we have to protect our client. And so I know there are certain things that we just have to wait and give out.
Yeah, I'd say the two biggest things are the customer names and then employee names. And typically, my rule of thumb has been until they start spending money on legal, then we're not giving it. And I don't want to put the business owner in a bad position to where if it's a competitor, or if they're in the same space, that they're going to come and try to poach employees, whatever it may be. I just don't want to do that. So general rule of thumb is until they start spending money, not getting the information.
Yeah. And I would also add, it's not just name, it's pricing, right?
Yeah, pricing too. That's a big one.
If you give out the pricing, not just for your customers, but also maybe the salaries. We've seen before where people go around and they'll there may be a non-solicitation in there, but there's still hey, look, he's wanting to sell. Come work for us, and I can pay you X amount, and knowing that that's higher than what they're getting there. So we have to protect our client from those things, and there's the right time for everything, right? There is a right time to share information, but you have to pick the right time.
Going back to the NDA, I would say what it also protects is word getting out to employees or customers. They find out about the deal early on, and either employees confront the owner, or they start talking, and it puts the deal in jeopardy. So that's another reason why the NDA is signed.
Along the same line, if competitors find out, it is detrimental, because if Mason's selling his company and I'm a competitor and I find out, I'll go straight to his customers and say, hey, so and so, there's going to be a change. There are going to be changes. You might want stability. Come to me. And that is something that we have to protect our clients from.
So negotiations come to a close, moving toward closing, right? Sign those documents, fireworks, everybody's happy, it happens. Talk about post-closing a little bit. How does what we do as advisors at ICCG, how may that look different than working with another advisor in M&A?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just continue to hold their hand just through the transition period of, there are things like working capital that's, cutoffs and all that kind of stuff that needs to be calculated post-close. And so we continue to hold their hand for, as long as they need, but making sure that the transition does go smoothly. So Andrew, if you want to add anything, feel free.
Yeah, one of the things that has been a privilege for us is that sometimes we get to, there's going to be some transition period for them that they have to stay with the company for 3-6 months or 5 years or, whatever that looks like. And the privilege that we get is that they end up having this retirement party at the end and we're invited, right? And I will say it's not very common, but we have been a part of this process to help them work towards that, and we get to celebrate. And so the one of the biggest reasons why we get to be there is because we're a part of that transition. And there is, like you said, working capital true ups and all of that. I think we check in after a time to say, hey, how are you doing? Because it's an emotional process, and they need to talk to somebody. And so, yes, the whole this is it's a business thing, and we make sure everything is all organized and it's done the way it should. But at the end of the day, what about how they're feeling after they've just basically stopped doing what they've been doing for 30 years, right? And so it is an emotional process that we come in and check in, and so it is key for us to have that relationship with them to make sure that they're processing it in the right way. The last thing I'll say about that whole about after the acquisition is on the sell side, right? Our clients, they will make sure that they have somebody like a wealth manager, financial advisor that they will probably have already met with, but even if they haven't, we'll make sure that we can sit down with them and introduce them to a good wealth manager and figure out just based on their goals what they want to do. And so that's an emotional process in itself, and so we try to hold their hand through it.
Well, to our listeners, I hope that episode has helped you to get a really good idea of the M&A process and what that looks like, walking through it, and the timeline. And thank you so much for joining us today, Andrew, Mason. Thank you for being here. That's all the time we got for today. And that wraps up another episode of Integrated Insights with ICCG. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for more stories from our team. We love hearing from our listeners. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover, please send us an email in the show notes. For more information about ICCG, please check us out on our website or follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Until next time, there's always a seat at our table.